Her pack sold her for being infertile. But 3 nights after the Alpha King took her in, Lisa Newmoon felt life bloom beneath her heart. An impossible bond that shattered every lie she'd been told. Now she must face the terrifying truth. She was never broken, only meant for a king. And the child she carries will either save their world or burn it to ash. The full moon hung low and heavy over the clearing as Lisa Newmoon took her final steps across the frost-covered ground of Silverpine territory. Her worn canvas bag hung from her shoulder, the strap digging into her collarbone with each step. She didn't look back. She didn't want to see the stone-faced pack elders standing in judgment, or her younger sister's smug expression of relief that the family shame was finally being removed. The pack house door had closed behind her with a decisive thud, as though the entire pack were eager to forget she'd ever existed. The frozen grass crunched under her boots as she approached the line of vehicles at the edge of the clearing. Sleek black SUVs with tinted windows that gleamed under the moonlight, too elegant and powerful for a small mountain pack like Silverpine. These vehicles didn't belong here. Neither did the wolves who'd arrived with them. Alpha King Cain New Hill. That's what her father had called him when he'd announced the deal. Lisa had no idea who he truly was, only that he commanded a presence that made her pack elders, alphas who'd ruled Silverpine for decades, bow their heads and speak in hushed, respectful tones. She'd grown up watching those same elders snap orders and demand submission from everyone around them. But Cain's arrival made them shrink, made them careful with every word. He wasn't intimidating in any obvious way. He wasn't shouting, wasn't bearing fangs, didn't need to throw his weight around to prove his dominance. His power was more primal than that. The stillness in his silver eyes, the controlled grace in his movements, the absolute authority in his silence. Even his voice when he'd spoken to the elders, was low and steady, ancient and certain, like someone who'd commanded armies and never needed to repeat himself. Lisa pressed her trembling hands against her sides as she approached the lead vehicle. A massive wolf with dark fur and knowing amber eyes, clearly Cain's beta, stood beside it, watching her with an expression somewhere between curiosity and pity. She didn't know whether to thank the Alpha King or curse him for what was happening. Was he saving her from the pack that had rejected her, or was he simply purchasing damaged goods? Technically both could be true. The beta opened the rear door as she drew near, and then Cain himself stepped out from the opposite side of the vehicle. He moved with predatory fluidity, and the moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, the battle scars that marked his jaw and brow, the silver streaks in his dark hair that spoke of centuries lived. He wasn't cold like the night air. He radiated heat, presence, raw alpha power that made her omega instincts simultaneously want to submit and to flee. "Miss Newmoon," Cain said, his voice resonating through the clearing like distant thunder. "Are you ready?" She stared at him, watching the way the moonlight reflected in those impossible silver eyes, the way he stood utterly still while the wind whipped his coat around him. He looked every inch the legendary king the stories spoke of, ancient, powerful, and utterly in control. "Do I have a choice?" Lisa asked, not bothering to hide the tremor in her voice or the defiance that rose up despite her fear. For a moment she thought she saw something almost like respect flicker across his features. Just a flash, quickly gone. "Not anymore," he answered honestly. "But I assure you, Omega, you're far safer leaving than staying." "Safe." She let out a bitter laugh. What a strange word. She had never felt safe in Silverpine. Not with pack elders who treated her like a genetic failure. Not with pack members who whispered that her inability to conceive made her worthless, as though her body had betrayed some fundamental Omega purpose. Not with the constant shame, the pitying looks, the isolation that made her feel like she was living as a ghost in her own pack. A gust of frigid wind made her pull her thin jacket tighter. Several wolves in the clearing shifted on their paws, their eyes glowing in the darkness. "If you'll get in," Cain said, gesturing to the open door. His tone wasn't harsh, but it wasn't a request either. Lisa climbed inside, the leather seats unexpectedly warm against the cold that had seeped into her bones. The door closed behind her with a solid final sound, shutting out the clearing, the pack, her family, the entire suffocating weight of Silverpine and everything she'd been told she could never be. She released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, watching the mist of it dissipate in the heated interior. Cain slid into the seat beside her rather than the front, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the scent of pine and smoke, and something wild that made her omega instincts hum with recognition. The faintest hint of satisfaction crossed his face, as though he were pleased she hadn't tried to run. The interior of the vehicle smelled like leather and mountain air and something else. Something ancient and metallic, like blood and magic mixed together. As the beta started the engine and the convoy began to move, Lisa pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching the only home she'd ever known disappear into the darkness behind them. She had no idea what waited for her in the Northlands. She had no idea that in 3 days, everything she believed about herself would be shattered. She had no idea that the Alpha King sitting beside her, watching her with those ancient silver eyes, had been searching for her across centuries. And she definitely had no idea that the impossible had already begun. That even now, in this very moment, life was stirring where everyone had sworn it could never exist. The last thing she saw before Silverpine vanished completely was the full moon, heavy and red-tinged on the horizon, watching her leave like an omen. Or a blessing. Welcome back to the pack, my beautiful wolves. If you're already hooked and ready to run with this story, howl your approval by hitting that subscribe button and dropping a comment below telling me what territory you're watching from. Whether you're from the frozen Northlands or the sun-warmed South, I want to know where my pack members are. Tomorrow I'm bringing you another tale of mates, magic and destiny that you won't want to miss. Your alpha has spoken, now let us begin the hunt. The convoy wound higher into the mountains until the trees gave way to stone and snow, and then the fortress appeared, not built upon the mountain but carved from it, as though the peak itself had been hollowed out and shaped by ancient hands. Torches blazed along massive walls that disappeared into the darkness above, and Lisa caught glimpses of wolves everywhere, some in human form standing guard with weapons, others prowling the ramparts in their beast forms, eyes glowing like scattered stars in the night. The vehicles rolled through gates thick enough to withstand a siege, and Lisa's breath caught. This wasn't just a pack house. This was a kingdom. A realm unto itself, brutal and magnificent, perched at the top of the world. Kane's beta was waiting in the courtyard as they emerged from the SUV. A grizzled warrior with silver-streaked hair and scars that told stories of 100 battles. His eyes swept over Lisa with open curiosity, assessing her the way a soldier might assess unexpected cargo. Kane moved to her side with that same fluid grace, his presence a wall between her and every watching eye. "Garrick," Kane said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. "She is mine. Protect her as you would protect me." The words were simple, but their meaning reverberated through the courtyard. Several wolves straightened, their gazes shifting from curiosity to something approaching reverence. Garrick's expression softened just slightly and he bowed his head. "With my life, my king." Kane led her through corridors of dark stone and flickering torchlight, past tapestries depicting ancient battles and halls where wolves trained even at this late hour. Lisa tried to take it all in, but her mind was spinning. Everything here felt timeless, powerful, far removed from the small mountain pack she'd left behind. When Kane pushed open a set of double doors, Lisa stopped breathing. The chambers beyond were vast, a suite fit for royalty with high ceilings, a fireplace already burning, thick furs draped across furniture carved from dark wood, and windows that overlooked the moonlit valley far below. "This can't be for me," she whispered. Kane stepped into the room, lighting more candles with practiced ease. "You are not a prisoner here, Lisa. You are not a servant. You are." He paused, something unreadable flickering across his features. "You will understand soon enough." He lingered at the door, his silver eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her omega instincts flutter. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we will speak of truths your pack would never tell you." His voice softened just slightly. "You are safe here, Lisa Newmoon. Safer than you have ever been." Then he was gone, the door closing with a quiet click that somehow felt like a promise. Lisa stood alone in the enormous room, overwhelmed and exhausted. She bathed in the adjoining chamber, a luxury she'd never experienced, and collapsed into the massive bed, sinking into furs and softness. Sleep claimed her almost instantly. She dreamed of running through moonlit woods, her paws, striking the earth in perfect rhythm. A voice called her name in a language she didn't know but somehow understood, syllables that tasted like starlight and ancient magic. The voice was warm, commanding, familiar. It wrapped around her like an embrace. Lisa woke in darkness, gasping, her heart racing. And then she felt it. A flutter. a warmth blooming low in her belly. A presence in her womb that hadn't been there before. Impossible, undeniable, alive. She pressed her hands to her stomach, trembling, and felt it again. Tears streamed down her face, hot and unstoppable. It couldn't be real. Everyone had told her it was impossible. Years of tests, diagnoses, shame. But she felt it. Life. Growing. The moonlight spilled through her window, and somewhere in the fortress, a wolf howled, long and mournful and beautiful. Lisa curled around the impossible truth taking root inside her and wept. Lisa woke to golden sunlight streaming through the windows and a knock at her door. A young Omega entered with fresh clothes, soft leathers and linens in deep emerald that fit her perfectly as though they'd been made for her. The girl's eyes were kind but curious, and she left quickly after helping Lisa dress, murmuring something about the king requesting her presence. Her stomach twisted with nerves as she was led through the fortress to a smaller, more intimate chamber where a table had been set near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the valley. Cain stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, watching the morning light paint the mountains gold. He turned as she entered, and something in his expression made her breath catch. He looked less like the distant, commanding king from last night and more like someone who'd been waiting for something precious to arrive. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the table laden with food, fresh bread, honey, fruits she'd never seen before, meat still steaming. "You must be hungry." Lisa sat, her hands trembling in her lap. She wanted to speak, to ask 1,000 questions, to tell him about the impossible thing she'd felt in the darkness. But her throat closed around the words. Cain settled across from her, pouring tea with practiced grace. His silver eyes never left her face. "You felt it," he said quietly. Not a question. A certainty. She nodded, unable to form words. Tears pricked her eyes. A smile crossed his features then, rare and genuine, transforming the harsh lines of his face into something almost gentle, almost young despite the centuries she could sense weighing on him. "Good," he said softly. "Then your body remembers what your mind was taught to forget." "I don't understand." Her voice came out broken. "They said that I could never. Your pack was wrong." Cain leaned forward, his intensity pinning her in place. "You are not infertile, Lisa. You never were. You are moon-blessed." The words hung in the air between them like a spell. "Moon-blessed Omegas are a bloodline most believed extinct," Cain continued, his voice taking on the cadence of someone reciting ancient history. "They carry fertility magic in their very essence. Magic that lies dormant, hidden, until they meet their true mate. Your body was protecting itself, waiting. Not broken. Waiting." Lisa's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. But the tests, the healers, saw what they expected to see. A dormant Omega reads as infertile to those who don't know what to look for. Cain's gaze dropped to where her hand rested. "Your pack didn't know what you were. Or perhaps they sensed it and feared it. Either way, they could not have kept you." "Why not?" "Because moon-blessed Omegas answer to their mates, not their packs. Because the bond between true mates transcends pack law, territory, politics. Because you were never meant for Silverpine." His voice dropped lower, almost reverent. "You were always meant to be here. With me." The certainty in his words should have frightened her. Instead, something deep in her chest responded to it, recognizing truth in a language older than words. "The child," she whispered. "Is it real?" Cain's smile returned, fierce and proud. "Very real. And impossible for anyone but us." Lisa looked down at the table, at the food growing cold, at her trembling hands. Everything she'd believed about herself, every diagnosis, every moment of shame, all of it was a lie. She wasn't broken. She was dormant. Waiting for him. She met Cain's silver gaze, seeing the ancient patience there, the certainty of someone who'd searched across centuries. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Cain said, "we prepare for what comes next. Because when the world learns what you carry, they will come for us. And we will be ready." The council chamber was carved from the mountain's heart. A circular room with walls of dark stone and a domed ceiling painted with constellations Lisa didn't recognize. Ancient tapestries hung between torch brackets, depicting wolves beneath blood moons and battles long forgotten. Cain led her to the center where a round table of blackened wood dominated the space, and 3 figures already waited. Garrick stood as they entered, his warrior's posture relaxing slightly when Cain nodded. Beside him sat a woman who looked impossibly old and impossibly young at once. Her white hair cascaded like moonlight down her back, and her eyes held the depth of centuries. She rose with fluid grace, studying Lisa with an expression of wonder that made her skin prickle. "Mira," Cain said. "My head healer. She is moon-blessed as well, one of the last of the old bloodlines." The ancient Omega moved forward, reaching out to touch Lisa's face with weathered fingers. "I never thought I would see another in my lifetime," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of grief and hope tangled together. "Child, you are a miracle." The third figure remained seated, a thin, sharp-eyed wolf with gray streaking through his dark hair and a staff carved with runes leaning against his chair. His gaze fixed on Lisa with an intensity that felt like being read page by page, soul by soul. "Thaddeus," Cain said. "My advisor. He remembers the old ways, the old laws." "The prophecy is coming to pass," Thaddeus said without preamble, his voice rough as gravel. He didn't sound pleased or frightened, merely certain, as though he'd been waiting for this moment for longer than Lisa could comprehend. Cain guided Lisa to a chair, his hand steady on her lower back. She sat, feeling the weight of their combined stares, the air thick with something she couldn't name. Thaddeus rose slowly, leaning heavily on his staff. 3,000 years ago, when the first moon-blessed Omegas walked these mountains, they were revered as sacred, living vessels of creation magic. But power breeds fear and fear breeds violence. The bloodlines were hunted, scattered, driven into hiding or extinction. His eyes found Lisa. Until now. He began to pace, his staff tapping against stone. The ancient texts speak of a time when the wolf kingdoms would fracture, when Alpha would turn against Alpha, when chaos would threaten to consume us all. And in that darkness a child would be born of moon-blessed blood and royal lineage, born of an Omega deemed barren and a king without an heir. Lisa's hand moved to her stomach and Myra's eyes followed the gesture with reverent understanding. "This child," Thaddeus continued, "would possess unprecedented power. The political might of the throne combined with the primal magic of the moon-blessed. The ability to command loyalty, to heal or harm, to unite the fractured kingdoms under one banner." He paused, his expression darkening. "Or to dominate them entirely." The silence that followed was suffocating. "Many Alphas will want your child dead," Thaddeus said, turning to face Lisa directly. "They will see the prophecy as a threat to their autonomy, their power. They will strike before the child can draw breath." His gaze shifted to Cain. "Others will want to control it, to use the child as a weapon, a tool for their own ambitions. Both paths are equally dangerous." Lisa felt her chest tighten, panic rising. Everything was moving too fast. Yesterday she was worthless, today she carried a child that could reshape the world or destroy it. Cain rose from his seat and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. His presence expanded, filling every corner with raw, undeniable authority. "Then we prepare for war," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. "No one touches what is mine." His silver eyes found hers across the table, and something fierce and protective blazed in them. "What is ours?" he corrected, and the words felt like a vow carved in stone. Mira led Lisa to a chamber at the top of the fortress where the walls were carved with ancient symbols and moonlight poured through open skylights. The air hummed with something old and powerful, making Lisa's skin prickle with awareness. "Your magic is not a weapon you wield," Mira explained, settling onto a cushion and gesturing for Lisa to do the same. "It is a part of you as natural as breathing. Right now it's wild, untamed, responding to your emotions, your fear. We must teach you to understand it." The exercises were strange at first. Breathing patterns that felt wrong until they suddenly felt right, meditations where Lisa was supposed to reach inward and sense the life growing inside her. But then something shifted. She felt it, a pulse of warmth, a presence that was both her and not her, ancient and new at once. Power thrummed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat, and when she opened her eyes she could sense the wolves in the fortress below, their life forces like distant stars in her awareness. "I can feel them," she whispered, awed and terrified. "All of them." Mira smiled, tears glistening in her ancient eyes. "That is the gift of moon-blessed Omegas. Life recognizes life. You will always know who stands with you and who means you harm." That evening, Cain came for her himself, leading her to his private chambers where a meal had been prepared. The room was less formal than the council chamber, still magnificent but personal, with books lining one wall and weapons displayed on another. They ate in comfortable silence at first, but Lisa's mind kept circling back to something Thaddeus had said. "Why were you declared infertile?" she asked quietly. Kane's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. He set down his fork with deliberate care. "My family sought to control me," he said, his voice low and edged with old anger. "For centuries they pressured me to take a mate of their choosing. Political alliances, strategic bonds, nothing to do with love or destiny. When I refused, when I said I would wait for my true mate." He paused, his silver eyes distant. "They spread the lie that I was sterile. A punishment and a warning. It has haunted me for decades, shaped how other packs see me, limited my power." Lisa reached across the table without thinking, her fingers brushing his scarred knuckles. "Then we were both lied to," she said softly. "Both told we were broken when we were just waiting." Kane's fingers curled around hers, his touch warm and certain. "And now we reclaim our truth," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Together." Later, as moonlight spilled through his windows, Kane stood before her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "There is something I must ask you," he said. "The mate bond, it can be completed with a claiming bite. It will link our souls, amplify your powers, make it so we can always find each other, always feel each other." His voice dropped lower. "But it must be your choice, Lisa. Always your choice." She looked up at this ancient king who'd searched centuries for her, who'd declared war to protect her, who'd given her truth when her whole life had been lies. "Yes," she whispered. Kane's eyes flared silver. He drew her close, his hand cradling her neck with reverent gentleness. When his teeth pierced the junction of her throat and shoulder, pleasure and magic exploded through her like lightning. She gasped, gripping his shoulders as power surged between them. His strength, her magic, intertwining until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. When it was done, she could feel him in her mind. A steady, protective presence like a shield wrapped around her soul. "You are never alone again," Kane whispered against her skin, and Lisa believed him. The news reached them 3 days after the mate bond was completed. Lisa was in the training chamber with Mira, learning to shield her emotions from bleeding through the bond, when Garrick burst through the doors. His expression was grim, a sealed letter clutched in his fist. "High King," he said breathless. "The Alpha Council knows." Kane went utterly still in a way that made Lisa's instincts scream danger. She felt his rage through the bond, controlled, precise, deadly. "How?" "There's a spy in the outer territories. Someone saw the healer's supplies being brought in, made assumptions, sold the information." Garrick's jaw clenched. "We're hunting them, but the damage is done." Kane took the letter, broke the seal with deliberate slowness and read. His expression didn't change, but Lisa felt the fury building in him like a storm gathering strength. When he looked up, his silver eyes were cold as winter death. "They demand I present myself before the council and explain," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "They want to question my choices, my mate, my heir." "What will you tell them?" Mira asked quietly. "Nothing." Kane crumpled the letter in his fist. "I answer to no one. My mate and heir are not up for debate." 2 days later, an envoy arrived. 3 alphas representing the council, their wolves filing into the fortress's great hall with calculated arrogance. Kane received them on his throne with Lisa standing at his right, Garrick at his left and Mira nearby. The presence of moon-blessed omegas made the visiting alphas visibly uncomfortable, their eyes darting between Lisa and Mira with poorly concealed unease. The lead envoy, a scarred alpha named Marcus, spoke with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Alpha King Kane Newhill, the council has deliberated. You will bring your omega before us within the fortnight to verify her condition and assess the threat level of any potential offspring. Failure to comply will be considered a declaration of independence from council authority." The hall fell silent. Wolves along the walls shifted, tension crackling through the air. "And if I refuse?" Kane asked, his tone almost conversational. Marcus's expression hardened. "Then you declare war on the council, on the established order, on centuries of pack law. Your kingdom will stand alone against every alpha family in the realm." Kane rose from his throne with the fluid grace of a predator. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the hall, resonating with absolute authority. "Tell them to send their armies. I will bury them in the snow." The envoys left within the hour, their outrage palpable. As the great doors closed behind them, Lisa felt her legs weaken. Cain was beside her instantly, his hand steadying her. "They'll come," she whispered, terror clawing at her throat. "Ancient alphas with armies and power and—" "Lisa." Cain cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Look at me. You're not going before them. You are staying here where you are protected. I will handle the council. But if they—" "No." His voice was absolute, unyielding. "I have fought for centuries. I have faced armies, betrayals, wars that would have broken lesser wolves. And I have never had something worth protecting the way I have you." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Let them come. Let them test the walls of this fortress. Let them learn what it means to threaten what is mine." Through the bond, Lisa felt his certainty, solid as mountain stone, unshakable as ancient magic. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. And somehow that made her ready too. The alarms shattered the night like breaking glass, a howling that echoed through every corridor of the fortress, primal and urgent. Lisa jolted awake, her heart hammering as Cain was already moving, pulling on weapons with practiced efficiency. Through the bond, she felt his battle readiness snap into place like armor. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice hard as iron. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Garrick." "Cain." But he was already gone, the door slamming behind him. She heard his roar echo down the corridor, rallying his warriors, and then chaos erupted. The sounds of combat, snarls, screams, the clash of steel reverberated through the stone walls. Lisa pressed herself against the headboard, trying to steady her breathing. Through the bond, she felt Cain engaged in battle, his focus sharp as a blade. She reached for the connection Mira had taught her, sensing the life forces in the fortress. Cain blazing like a sun, Garrick fighting alongside him, other wolves scattered throughout the grounds. And then she felt them. Cold presences moving through the fortress like shadows given form, their intent murderous and precise. Alpha-born warriors, trained killers, and they were heading toward the royal quarters. Toward her. The sounds of fighting grew closer. She heard guards shouting outside her door, the wet sound of blades finding flesh, bodies hitting stone. And then silence. Terrible, suffocating silence. The door exploded inward. The assassin moved like smoke given shape, lean, scarred, his eyes empty of everything but purpose. 2 guards lay dead at her doorway, their throats torn open. He stepped over them without looking down, his gaze fixed on Lisa with cold certainty. "Nothing personal, Omega," he said, drawing a silver blade that gleamed in the moonlight. "But your child cannot be born." He lunged. Lisa's body reacted before her mind could process the threat. Terror and rage collided inside her like twin storms meeting, and she screamed, not in fear but in defiance. The power that had been building inside her since the moment she'd arrived, since the mate bond, since the first flutter of life in her womb, exploded outward. Silver light erupted from her center, a shockwave of pure life magic that blazed like a newborn star. The assassin was caught mid-lunge, his body lifted and flung backward. He didn't even have time to scream before the light consumed him, burning through flesh and bone until nothing remained but ash scattering in the air. The power kept expanding, flowing through the room and beyond, creating a dome of shimmering silver light that pulsed with her heartbeat. Lisa stood at its center, her hands outstretched, her eyes blazing with that same otherworldly silver, her entire body trembling with the force of what she'd unleashed. She could feel everything, every wolf in the fortress, every heartbeat, every wound. She felt Cain's shock through the bond, felt him racing toward her with Garrick at his heels. The door, or what remained of it, burst open again. Cain stopped in the doorway, Garrick behind him, both covered in blood that wasn't their own. They stared at the glowing barrier, at the ash on the floor, at Lisa standing in the center with power crackling around her like lightning. Cain's expression transformed from fear to awe to fierce, savage pride. He stepped through the barrier as though it weren't there, because it recognized him, welcomed him, and crossed to her in 3 strides. "By the gods," he whispered, his hands cupping her face as the light began to fade. "You are magnificent." Lisa collapsed into his arms, the power receding as quickly as it had come, leaving her shaking and exhausted and alive. Dawn broke cold and blood-red over the fortress. Lisa sat wrapped in furs near the fire in Kane's chambers, a cup of tea warming her trembling hands. She couldn't stop seeing it, the assassin's body disintegrating, the silver light pouring from her like a weapon she'd never known she possessed. Mira sat beside her, one weathered hand resting gently on Lisa's knee. In the dungeons below, Kane was extracting truth from the survivors. Lisa could feel his cold fury through the bond, controlled but absolute. 6 assassins lay dead. 2 remained and they were talking. When Kane finally returned, his knuckles were bruised and his expression carved from stone. He crossed to Lisa immediately, checking her over with gentle hands despite the violence still radiating from him. Alpha Gregor, he said, his voice rough. He leads a faction within the council. Old families who see my growing power as a threat to their influence. Your pregnancy is proof I can establish a dynasty they cannot challenge, cannot manipulate, cannot control. His jaw clenched. He hired the assassins. Sent them to kill you before the child could be born. They knew exactly where to find me, Lisa whispered. Yes. Which means Gregor has allies here or had them. Kane's eyes darkened. Garrick is handling it. Lisa set down her tea with shaking hands. I killed someone, she said, the words feeling strange on her tongue. I felt him die. I felt his life just extinguish. Mira squeezed her knee gently. Your Omega magic is protective by nature, child. It responds to threats against yourself, your mate, your offspring. You will always be able to defend what you love. It is written into your very essence. The ancient Omega's eyes held understanding and something like pride. But raw power without control is dangerous. What you did tonight saved your life, but it will take practice to harness it, to call it forth when needed and restrain it when you must. Lisa looked down at her hands, still seeing the silver light that had blazed from them. She felt violated and powerful at once, shaken by the violence but exhilarated by the proof that she could fight back, that she wasn't helpless. I'm not sorry, she said quietly. He came to kill my child. I'm not sorry he's dead. Good, Kane said, his voice fierce with approval. Never apologize for protecting what is yours. He stood then, moving to the window where the morning sun painted the mountains gold. When he turned back, his expression was decided. I will not go to the council meeting, he announced. I will not bow before them and justify my choices. Instead, I'm sending a message. What message? Lisa asked. Kane's smile was sharp as a blade. That the attempt on my mate's life is an act of war. That I am withdrawing from the council effective immediately. The Northlands are now an independent kingdom, answering to no authority but our own. His silver eyes blazed. Any who challenge us will face the wrath of a king and a queen. Lisa felt the finality of it through the bond. The severing of old allegiances, the declaration of sovereignty, the promise of blood to come. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt her spine straighten, her chin lift. When will they come? She asked. Kane crossed to her, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. Soon. But we will be ready. Through the bond she felt his certainty. And for the first time since the assassin had crashed through her door, Lisa felt ready too. The fortress transformed into a war machine within days. Warriors who'd grown comfortable in peacetime found themselves drilling from dawn until dusk. The clang of steel on steel echoed through the courtyards and the mountain paths filled with patrols. Kane moved through it all like a storm given form, his commands absolute, his presence galvanizing every wolf in his service. Messengers rode out to smaller packs scattered throughout the northern territories, wolves who'd chafed under council rule, who'd been dismissed or marginalized by the old families. Kane's message was simple: stand with us or stand aside. By the third day, delegations began arriving. Alphas who'd been waiting for someone strong enough to challenge the council's grip, warriors tired of being pawns in political games, families who remembered when pack bonds meant more than power struggles. Lisa stood at Kane's side during each meeting, no longer hidden but displayed, a declaration of everything they were fighting for. She wore the colors of the Northlands now, deep blues and silver that made her look every inch a queen. When she entered a room, wolves bowed. When she spoke, they listened with reverence that would have terrified her weeks ago. Now it steadied her. They see what you are, Mira told her one evening as they trained. Not just Kane's mate but the future. Hope given form. The training had intensified until Lisa's entire body ached with exhaustion. She learned to summon the silver barrier without fear triggering it, to hold it steady while Mira threw objects at her, to expand it to cover others. She learned to sense threats through the network of life forces she could now perceive, to feel danger approaching like a discordant note in a symphony. Most importantly, she learned control. To call the power forth and to leash it before it consumed everything around her. Your magic responds to emotion, Mira explained. Fear made it explosive. Love will make it unbreakable. By the end of the week, Lisa could shield herself and 3 others simultaneously. It left her shaking and drained, but she could do it. Kane watched every session with fierce pride bleeding through their bond. On the 7th night, as the fortress buzzed with preparations and war councils, Kane found her alone in their chambers. Without a word, he took her hand and led her up winding stairs to the highest tower, a place she hadn't been before, open to the sky with views stretching endlessly across snow-covered peaks and frozen forests. The silence was profound after days of constant noise and activity. Lisa breathed it in, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. Kane stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. His hand settled over her belly, where the life inside her had grown stronger, more present. No matter what comes, he said quietly, his voice carrying across the mountaintops, we will face it together. You are my mate, my queen, and the mother of my heir. His arms tightened around her. I would burn the world for you. Lisa covered his hand with hers, feeling the steady pulse of their child beneath their joined palms. Through the bond, she felt Kane's absolute certainty, his unwavering commitment, his love that had waited centuries to find her. Then let them come, she said, her voice steady despite everything. We'll be ready. Below them, the fortress gleamed with torchlight. Warriors trained. Alliances formed. War approached like a gathering storm. But here in this moment, they were simply 2 souls who'd found each other against impossible odds. And that was worth fighting for. The scouts returned at dusk, their wolves foam-flecked and exhausted from hard riding. Lisa felt Kane's tension spike through the bond before Garrick even entered the war room. She stood from where she'd been studying maps with Thaddeus and moved to Kane's side instinctively. Alpha Gregor moves, Garrick reported, his voice grim. He's gathered forces from 6 major packs, over 2,000 warriors. They march north within the week. The room fell silent. Kane's forces numbered less than 800, even with the allied packs who'd pledged their support. They were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Let them come, Kane said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. Numbers mean nothing if they break against our walls. We have the high ground, the fortifications, and something they don't. His hand found Lisa's, fingers intertwining. We have something worth fighting for. That evening, as the sun bled red across the mountains, Kane led Lisa onto the great balcony overlooking the main courtyard. Below, the entire pack had gathered, warriors, healers, families, children. Hundreds of wolves, both in human form and beast, filled every available space. The murmur of voices fell silent as Kane raised his hand. Your queen wishes to speak, he announced, his voice carrying across the crowd. Then he stepped back, giving Lisa the space, the stage, the moment. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd never addressed more than a handful of people before, had spent her life being told to stay quiet, stay invisible, stay worthless. But when she looked out at the sea of faces, wolves who'd sworn to fight for her child, for the future she represented, something shifted inside her. She stepped forward and her voice rang out clear and strong. I was sold as worthless, she began, and the crowd stilled further, listening with intensity that made her skin prickle. I was told I was broken, that I had no value, no purpose. My own pack treated me as a burden to be discarded. He paused, letting the words settle. But I stand before you now as proof that lies do not define us. I carry the future of this kingdom, and I will protect it with everything I am. A rumble of approval moved through the crowd. She felt Kane's pride blazing through the bond, steadying her. They come to destroy what we're building, Lisa continued, her voice gaining strength. They come because they fear change, fear power they cannot control, fear a future where strength and love matter more than politics and manipulation. She placed her hand over her belly, feeling the life pulsing there. But we will not bow. We will not break. We will rise. The courtyard erupted in howls. hundreds of wolves lifting their voices to the darkening sky in a chorus of defiance and unity that shook the mountain itself. That night, in the privacy of their chambers with war looming on the horizon, Cain pulled Lisa close. The bond between them hummed with power and love and fierce determination. He cupped her face with both hands, his silver eyes holding hers. "When this is over," he said softly, "when our child is born and our enemies are defeated, I will give you the world you deserve. A world of peace, strength, and freedom. A world where you never doubt your worth again." Lisa smiled, fierce and certain, and pulled him down to kiss her. "Then let's take it," she whispered against his lips. Through the bond she felt his answer, a promise carved in stone, sealed in blood, written in the stars themselves. They would fight. They would win. They would rise. And nothing would ever break them again. Lisa Newmoon stands on the balcony of the highest tower, watching the dawn paint the mountains gold. Behind her, Cain sleeps, rare and precious, these moments of peace before battle. Her hand rests on her belly, feeling the strong, steady pulse of life growing there. The child who will change everything. She is no longer the rejected Omega from Silver Pine, no longer the girl declared infertile and worthless. She is queen of the Northlands, moon-blessed and powerful, mate to an ancient king and mother to a prophesied heir. She has killed to protect what is hers. She has spoken before hundreds with a voice that did not waver. She has transformed from invisible to unforgettable. The war is coming, she can feel it approaching like a storm, can sense the threat through the network of life she's learned to perceive. Alpha Gregor's forces will arrive within days, bringing violence and chaos and the promise of destruction. But Lisa is ready. She has magic that can level armies. She has a mate who would burn the world for her. She has wolves who follow her not from obligation but from belief. She has everything the prophecy promised and more. Her story is no longer one of survival. It is one of triumph, of rising from ashes, of proving that what the world discards can become what it fears most. She is the weapon and the shield. She is the queen who will rise. And when the dust settles and the blood dries and her child draws its first breath, the wolf kingdoms will remember her name. Lisa Newmoon. Queen of the Northlands. Mother of the prophecy. The Omega who was never broken, only waiting. She watches the sun rise over her kingdom and she smiles. Let them come. The queen has risen, but her story is far from over. If you want to see what happens when Alpha Gregor's army reaches the Northlands, when Lisa's power is truly tested in battle, and when the prophecy's full meaning is revealed, then you need to join the pack for my next video. The war is coming and you don't want to miss a single moment of blood, magic and triumph. Hit that notification bell so you'll know the instant the next chapter drops. Lisa Newmoon's legend is just beginning, and so is yours as part of this pack. Until we meet again under the full moon, stay fierce, stay loyal, and remember, you were never broken, only waiting for your moment to rise. Your alpha will return soon.